Shalom, I'm Namaru. This is my husband, Rabbi David Ru, and we are talking about Kedusha Shvi'it, the year that the land rests, and the produce that Jewish people grow within the traditional borders of the homeland is holy, actually has sanctity to it. So we have to conduct ourselves very differently about growing food and accessing food and how we use the food and what we do with the waste. It's very special to be here in Israel this year.
Well, last time we finished the series on Teshuvah Shvi'is, adding to Shmita. And as we learned at the very beginning, Gemara in Hashanah, בחריש ובקציר תשבות, that you will rest from plowing and harvesting. Rabbi Akiva learned from this the addition. From this, we learned that even before, from the plowing that's going to help on the Shmita year, you're not allowed to do it, even if it's done in the 6th year. And the harvest that comes out of the Shmita year, you're not allowed to involve with. So it seems from here that it's obvious that the prohibition of plowing on Shmita is a Torah prohibition. And this is what the Rambam says in the very, very beginning of Hilchos Shmita Viyovel. Mitzvah aseh lishbos mi'avodas haaretz ve'avodas ilan b'shnas hashvi'is. It's a positive mitzvah to rest from the work of the land and the work of the trees in the sabbatical year. Naamar b'shavsah haaretz Shabbos laHashem. As it says, the land will rest the Shabbos for God. Nאמר בחריש ובקציר תשבות. And it says, from plowing and from harvesting you will rest. וכל העושה מלאכה מעבודת הארץ or האילנות בשנה זו. And anyone that does any work of the land or the trees on this year, bitul mitzvah aseh, he has negated a positive mitzvah, va'avar al lo taseh, and he's transgressed a negative mitzvah. Shenamar, as it says, sadcha lo tizrע v'chamercha lo tizmor. Your field you will not plant, and your vineyard you will not prune. Now, this is all well and good, except 3 halachas later, in halacha 4, the Rambam says something that seems to imply that the plowing on Shmita is actually rabbinic in origin. And he says, how do these prohibitions? Ketzad, hachofer or choresh l'tzorech karka. If you're digging or plowing for the needs of the land, to improve the land for when I'm planting, or a misakel, or you're taking out stones, which is a very big thing in Eretz Yisrael where the ground is very stony, or a mizabel, or you're putting down manure, v'kiyotzi behen, or any similar thing that improves the land, mishar avodas haaretz, from any other work of the land, v'ken hamavrich or hamarkiv or anoteya, or you're grafting or putting a seedling in the ground, v'kiyotzi behen, or anything mi'avodas ilanos, or any other thing working the trees, makinos marcus mardus midivrehim. We give you lashes for rebellion from their words. It's a rabbinic prohibition. It's a rabbinic lashes. This implies that plowing on Shmita is a rabbinic problem, not a Torah problem. So the Radbaz, in his Tshuvas, he has a section of Tshuvas that are on the Lashon of the Rambam, the exact text of the Rambam. He says, I was asked how to explain this contradiction in the Rambam. I'm not going to read what we just said. And he says, Tshuva hanachon b'divrei harav zal t'shlosha minei charisha. The correct way to understand the words of the Rambam is that there are 3 different types of plowing. The first, yesh harisha l'takin akarka. There is a plowing to prepare the land. Lo nesra min Torah klal. This isn't a Torah prohibition. V'zuhi shikasav Rav Zal. This is what the Rav wrote, Bosaperik. Ketzad achoresh or achomer tzorech hakarka. This is plowing or digging for the improvement of the land before there are any seeds in it. Base, the second type of plowing. Charisha lachpos as a zera. The second type is plowing to cover up the seed. Now, First thing I have to say is their plows were not nearly as efficient as our plows. They only plowed a few inches of ground, not like our plows that can plow 1.5 feet or 45 centimeters. But you see from the order of the Mishnah in Shabbos that first the Mishnah lists Zoreya, seeding, and then Chorish, and then plowing. The seeds would be on the very surface and could be washed away easily by rains. And so after you seeded the land, you would plow it, which would put the seeds just a few inches below the ground, just like our planters today do. So he's saying the second type, Zuzriya Mamish, this is actually not really plowing, but planting. And therefore, this type of plowing would carry a Torah abortion. Odiesh Charisha Shlishis, there's also a third type of plowing, the Radbaz says, Shig Legadel Ha'ilanos. This is to make the trees grow better. I'm plowing around the trees to aerate the soil, to get the dirt in it, to get the water mixed up with the soil and so on, to soften the soil so that the water can penetrate it better in the winter, and all of these things. And he says, Shu Bechlal Zriya. This is a part of planting, Kamozmira, just like pruning a tree is part of planting. So he says, so the second two, which are a Torah, he says are a Torah prohibition, and you would get lashes from the Torah. The first one, which is what the Rambam is talking about in the fourth halacha, is only prohibited rabbinically. Now, the Chazon Ish takes very great issue with this. In Hilchos Shvis Siman Yudches Gimel, he says, Radbaz de Chorish Bilanos Yesh Bo Mishum Noteya, Ve'alzei Anu Musharim B'Tosefes Shvis Min Torah. The Radbaz says that plowing around the trees, Erev Shmita, in the 6th year, to make them grow better in the 7th year, this is a Torah prohibition of Tosefes Shvis. Aval Charisha B'Sidei Lavan Tosefes D'Rabbanan. But to plow a field where I'm going to plant grain, this is only a rabbinic prohibition. Lomar ein hadavar ken. And he says it doesn't make any sense. It's not correct. Charisha b'ilanos ein bo mishum noteya l'kuli alma. Plowing a orchard is not planting. I'm sorry, he says. Levicha charisha tosefes min Torah bein b'stei ilan ubein b'stei lavan. And he says, so the Torah prohibition is the same plowing in the 6th year, whether you're in a stei lavan, a grain field, or you're in an orchard, it's all the same. And I'm skipping the Iker de Charisha min Torah l'kulei alma shloshim lifnei Rosh Hashanah. Everyone agrees, he says, the main principle is everyone agrees that the plowing 30 days before Rosh Hashanah is a Torah prohibition. B'shvis atzma, and just like plowing on Shmita itself, v'ken kasav Rambam parshim spati, v'ken kasav Tosos, and so on. This is what the Ramban writes in his commentary in the Torah. This is what the Tosos write in Gittin, and so on. This is exactly what it has to be. So the problem is now, what do you say about the Rambam saying it's only a rabbinic prohibition in halacha 4? So the Chazon Ish earlier says, Miu charisha asur min Torah. You have to say that plowing is prohibited from the Torah, whether you're talking about Rabbi Yishmael or Rabbi Akiva. They had different ways of learning the halachas, Tosefes Shvis or Tosefes Shabbos. Torah, because even 30 days before is a prohibition from the Torah. But there's not a direct lav. The prohibition of Tosefes isn't a lav in the way that the other prohibitions of the Torah are. Therefore, they're no Torah lashes, they're only rabbinic lashes for such a thing. So that's how the Chazon Ish deals with the apparent contradiction. While we're dealing with plowing, there's one other thing I wanted to do, which the Rambam says, Sokriness ilam b'sikra, you're allowed to put this red stuff on the tree on Shmita. It would stop bugs from eating and damaging the tree permanently. V'toanim oso ba'avanim, you're allowed to hold it in place with stones. Vodrin tachas gafanim, and you're allowed to weed under the vines, and you can do these. I'm not exactly sure what this was, but there's something that they did with the olive trees that was unique to olives. On all of these things, if I'm doing it to make the tree grow better, it's prohibited. But if I'm doing these things to seal up the holes in them where the bugs are getting in, or where the tree's being damaged in some way, it's mutter.
For long-term protection of the tree, beyond the Shmita year.
Right.
So
wait, hold on.
I have questions about weeding when you're done.
I think we're going to have a whole section on weeding at some point.
Okay, I hope so, because I have a lot of questions about
Yes, there
weeding.
are a lot of questions on weeding. Normally, oder is translated today as hoeing, but it's clearly not, because most of the commentaries in the Rambam say the difference between oder and harisha is one is done by hand and one is done with a tool. So the hoeing that we do today with a hoe, according to most commentaries, would be a Torah prohibition of plowing. So you can't weed in any case with a tool. You have to do it by hand.
Okay.
That's what would come out of the vast majority of these discussions. And again, the simplest way of saying it for right now is if I'm removing these weeds so that the plant can survive and not have long-term damage, then it's mutter. If I'm doing it so it will grow better, that I'm not allowed to do. Does that help for now?
Kind of. I think in the neighborhood, there was a landscaper that was trimming trees, but it wasn't for the trees to grow better. It was so people could walk on the sidewalk.
Right, that's not...
It's like a construction.
Yeah, right, that's like any type of construction would be allowed.
So what about weeds growing between the cracks of the sidewalk? You could also take those out?
Yeah, because you're not doing it for any improvement of anything.
For beautification of the space, but not
That would be
for
allowed.
the betterment of the plant.
Yeah, but that's right.
Oh, okay. That's good to know. I'm going to clean up the sidewalk.
And we'll have much more on this at a later date.